Okay.
Steve has agreed to take a few questions, and I have a few that were already submitted, and then we'll take some from the audience if you'd like. So grab a seat real quick. First of all, my friend, thank you very much. And I'm so glad that you shared what things really mean. This man, he worships his employees, and his employees worship him. They're his family. And if you spend any time at the Wynn or the Encore, anywhere in the world, you go to those places, China or here, they talk about this man like a father. They talk about this man like, you know, someone that moves and inspires them, and they're with him for decades, some of them. There's some of your employees that have been there literally that long, and they're raving fans of the culture. They're proud to be a part of the organization, and that is the ultimate secret, as everybody knows, but very few people actually execute that. So it's wonderful for you to share this specific system. Here's a question that so many people in the room have. These are individuals in the room. Some run fairly large companies, 250 to $1 billion. Some are that 50 to 250. Some are just taking the leap. Some are halfway taking the leap with one foot on first, trying to get to second, scared. You've taken some huge risks in your life. 1989, you know, you and I were talking about on the way here. There was a bunch of boxes here in Las Vegas. Everything was just a box with a casino in it. And you came up with this idea how to change things, but there was no guarantee it was going to succeed. And I was talking with you earlier about your saying that, I remember Business Week, I believe it was, came out and said, Steve wins Snake Eyes.
Snake Eyes for Steve.
Yeah. Share a little bit about that. And I also remember here when you blew up the Desert Inn, you didn't have a gambling license when you went to buy that place.
Yeah.
So you bought the hotel without a gambling license.
I was
Somewhat
sort of a
risky venture.
I was sort of a homeboy, though.
Yes, I understand. But how do you look at risk? How do you get yourself to take risk? Are you afraid? And if you are, how do you get through it?
It's funny you should ask that question because it was repeated to me. It was first asked. In 1987, we were building the Mirage. And Michael Jackson had just recorded the Thriller album, which had broken the world open. He was putting together his concert tour called Thriller. He called up Diana Ross, who worked for me, and said, I need to meet Siegfried and Roy, and I know that Steve Wynn is going to put him into the new Mirage. Could you introduce me to Steve Wynn, because I got to talk to Siegfried and Roy about an illusion. Diana called me. Michael came and stayed with me for 2 days, and I said, I'll arrange for you to go visit Siegfried and Roy at their home, where they had a rehearsal hall. Michael met Siegfried and Roy. They taught him how to do a substitution gag that he used in the tour. And during that time, Michael and I became friendly in 1987, and he was staying in the hotel at the Golden Nugget downtown, and he called my office after he came back from Siegfried and Roy and said, hello, Steve. Could you come down to my room? I have something I have to ask you. Well, I was on the same floor as the top floor of the Nugget with my office. I walked down to the chairman's apartment, which was the same apartment where we did that commercial about towels with Sinatra. And Jackson was sitting there on the couch. He says, oh, thanks for coming. And he had on a black shirt and a black pair of jeans, and he said, I want to ask a big favor, and I swear no one will ever know it but me. And I want to tape it because at night I listen to the people that I've taped, and I learn stuff. Guy with the hair hanging down said, okay, sure. I sat down on the couch. He turned on a tape recorder, and he asked me, do you get scared? Because he had seen the construction of Mirage. And he knew it was going to cost $600 million in a town where they used to do things for $200 million. And I said, get scared. Not in the sense that you're asking me or that Tony just asked.
Yes.
I said, we do so much research and business planning and to convince ourselves that what we're doing is right, that by the time we get around to breaking ground, we've already raised money, because I would never start a building unless I had the money to finish it beforehand, which has gotten to be an old-fashioned idea around here. Start the building, then go get the money. I like to have the money before I start the building. So by the time we start the building, I've had to convince everybody of our idea.
Yes.
And I've gone over it so many times that even if I'm wrong, I have totally conned myself and everybody else. So no, I don't get scared. I do get very critical. I only see the mistakes, which is why I always want to build one more place, because I think if I can do one more, maybe, just maybe, I'll get it right.
Tell me this. You're in a business that has unbelievable stress associated to it, especially when you're a perfectionist, which you clearly are. How do you handle the stress of those things? How do you manage to stay in such a great state? You know, whenever I call your cell phone, the answer is response that says Steve, and the core message is, if you don't have anything good to tell me, hang up now. I'm paraphrasing massively, but how do you deal with the stress of business? Because you also seem to be a very fulfilled man, even though you have such incredibly high standards.
I bug Andrea. I bug my girlfriend, my fiance, and she says, "Oh, calm down," and she makes me feel better. So I got a very nice home life. That's a big thing, I think, in dealing with stress. But God knows, I'm stressed not about my business. I'm stressed about the country.
Yes,
I'm stressed about Washington. I have the advantage of being in Macau and watching the central government of China and Macau behave in a very orderly, predictable, consistent way. Up or down, left or right, they behave in a way that's totally predictable and doesn't change from one leader to the other when their terms run out. Here, who the hell knows what's happening next? What cuckoo idea, what foolish, illogical denial of common sense we're going to experience in Washington, D.C. by these politicians who basically we wouldn't give a middle management job to.
But how do you feel about them?
That was intemperate of me.
No, that was actually very moderate on your
But
part.
I don't want to give up any chance to complain about government.
Well,
That's our job as businessmen. That's our job as businessmen. President opened his mouth about education, blah, 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 last night. I sat with Michelle in the hotel next door and told her, Michelle, every society, Miss Obama,
First lady.
the First Lady,
Yes.
sat with her. Michelle, every society has a right to create its own priorities. The federal government can't interfere with education. It's a local state obligation by constitutional fiat. However, the government has a way of changing the game. If the president and Mr. Reid, my friend Harry, would announce tomorrow they're introducing a bill in Congress to improve education in America, the idea being that the more smart people attack a problem, the better chance there is for a positive result. Simple idea. So therefore, the best teachers leave teaching because they can't make enough money. Right when they get children and families, they move on. The worst teachers stay on and bring the system down. I say this. I, as a president, could not interfere with education directly. Local people do that, as they should, and they decide about unions, as they should. It's not our business. However, I can do this. I can announce that if you go into teaching and you pass a certain test that gives you qualification, and your students pass the test imposed by the state and the federal government.
So just to clarify, you're talking about, and people say you can't put these standards, federal government, but you're saying I can provide an incentive that once somebody's a teacher, if they can perform at a certain level.
Then they get an income tax credit of $75,000 a year on a joint return.
That's a very nice piece.
No extra government employees, Immediately, a whole bunch of kids in college would change their curriculum to be teachers, because that's like a 20% across the board raise to every teacher in America without touching any property tax or interfering with any local government. But the federal government and the state could have a test for the students, and if the teacher of those students has the students pass, she gets a tax credit of 75 G's for her and her husband, or him and his wife. And if they stay in for 10 years and the kids even reach another level and graduate, they get a tax credit of 100,000.
Wow.
That's the way the government can stick their finger into education in America across the land without interfering with anybody else's legal rights. I told that to Michelle Obama.
How did she respond?
She says, "What a great idea that is, Steve. I'll tell Barack." This was before the election, and she was doing a thing at the hotel. And I told James Carville. He says, "If I had any hair in my head, it would go up." It was on my boat. He said that. Nothing.
Nothing. It's problem solving. That's one of your greatest skills. I know, for example, here, the economy here in Vegas has been hit pretty hard, and I know some of the president's comments have also enhanced that experience for you in some ways.
Yes.
Facetiously.
Enhanced.
Yes,
Yeah.
enhanced. The question is, how do you deal, you're so good at solving problems, and that's what we all have to do in business. What system do you have for solving a problem? We were talking the other night at dinner about the fact that you wanted to make sure that no one was laid off during this incredibly tough time in Vegas. Everyone else is letting everybody off. I know you haven't done that in, what, 40 plus years?
I actually did 200 people.
No, I know just recently, but maybe
that
share
was the
about how
first
you
time
looked
in
at that
44
problem.
years.
Maybe talk about how you dealt with it first, and why did you have to, you solved the problem for a period of time, but then that problem came up in a new way.
We never had a layoff in 44 years. But when the recession started, I put people on, instead of 40 hours, 32 hours. I stopped all bonuses, starting with me, and I cut all salaries of salary employees by 15%. Now that was fine as an emergency measure, so no one would lose their job or their insurance. But when the thing went on for 16 or 17 months, a whole different dynamic kicked in. People couldn't live on the reduced salary, and it was affecting morale. And almost 4,000 people or 6,000 people out of 12,000 were affected. And morale was very poor. And I got a letter from an engineer. One of our engineers, Mr. Wynn, I got to leave town. I got to get a new job. You got to do the layoffs. You can't leave us on the reduced salary. I'm going to lose my home. Well, I was so struck by the letter that I called a kid at home, Italian boy. I said, wait a minute. If I do layoffs, they tell me that they would lose 15 engineers. What happens if one of them was you? He's, Mr. Wynn, I'm going to lose my job anyway. I'm telling you that the guys in the department feel that way. As long as you did it fairly, based upon skill and attendance, everybody would understand. I says, yeah, but the 15 people aren't going to get a job if I lay them off. It's not like everything's cooking in town. They'll be out of work. He says, we're going to be out of work anyway. So I called his boss, Marty, the head chief engineer. I said, Marty, I had this conversation. He says, well, that's the way they feel. I call the food and beverage guy. He says, the morale is terrible. It's been 17 months since the 32-hour work weeks.
In the beginning, though, people were excited because they saw
Yes,
that this was,
we're all in it together.
Be fired,
That's right. But after the 17th month, it turned. So my president of my hotel came to me with this dilemma.
Yes.
And he didn't know what to do. He was confused because it was a lose-lose situation. You had to make a decision. Either you broke a 44-year thing of saying we could never have a layoff, the only ones in the industry that could say that, or you're going to continue a bad program. No win in this conflict. And the guy's looking at me, 3 of them. What do we want to do, Steve? I said, let's go back to what we do know. Every time, go back to what you do know.
And that's
go
what
back.
you do in a problem, right?
That's right. I go back to,
about.
okay, we said the most important thing is employee morale and keeping the promise in this building. At this point, a thing that we did for the right reasons has become a negative to us.
Yes.
We gotta restore the salaries, but don't restore the salaries with an inflated payroll. We now know that after 17 months, business levels are lower and likely to remain so for some time. I want every department to go through completely and tell me any extra people that we don't need for sure. And it came back 212 people.
Wow.
212 out of 12,000. Right. But 212 people, mostly salaried people. And so I said the decision has to be in favor of the morale of the company. You got to do the layoffs. Oh, I hate it. But we're restoring 6,000 people to full pay. And that was more important. So when I was faced with a lose-lose situation, as you all are, no one's coming to see a boss with good news. They figure you know it already. They come to see you with a problem. When I get someone on my calendar, like the lawyer or the chief financial officer or one of the department heads, I know that something's gone wrong. That's a problem. And you know, that's why I like doing the design work. I'm safe with the felt tip pen and the whiteout and the trace paper. But when they come to see me about stuff, I know it's bad news. But I'm telling you, the fact that a decision is difficult or that neither side is a certain winner is no excuse for not making the decision. Not if you're the boss. Most bosses kick it down the road. They bullshit everybody and stall, like the politicians. They stall because they don't want to be criticized. They don't want to be wrong. There's no excuse for not making the decision. But when you're really stuck, go back to what you know, and it'll get you through it. Go back to what you know, the simplest idea. That's how I get through it anyway.
Yes. Yeah. What is your definition of leadership? What makes a great leader, and what kind of leader do we need today in business, in life?
Common sense. The ability, you know, I remember the famous quote by Gandhi. There go my people. I got to run to catch up with them, for I am their leader. Listen to employees. They are the ones who are touching the people, the public. They know whether things are working or not. They know what the people want. If they trust you and like you, they'll tell you. Everything I've ever learned worth a damn, I learned from my help. That's the first thing. I'm not saying that that's an exclusive thing, but that's a very important component. The other thing is common sense. If you know, we had a conversation, the president of the hotel, Marilyn Spiegel, and I, talking about advertising, and we're bringing a new guy on. And the question is, in a slow market, can we accelerate things with advertising? And I've got a prejudice in this matter. I think that in a high-line place, it's word of mouth. And that if you do commercial advertising, you look like you're on your knees, which is bad for marketing, bad for the brand. So our ability to accelerate the process of people coming to the hotel, having a good experience, and then telling others and coming back, that's our way home. Yeah. But how to speed it up, right. how to get more people to know about us quicker, that is what we're getting from an expert who knows how to work the internet. And I'm looking forward to being taught by him, because I'm not an internet guy. I don't play with computers as much as other people. And so I'm looking to be taught by this new hot guy that we've recruited. So every day I've got an attitude that I can get better at something from people that I work with. Yes. That open-mindedness, I think, is a very important part of leadership. If you think that you're the repository of the wisdom and that you'll deliver this like thunderbolts to the people below, you're a fool. That's not how it works at all. And again, I'm gonna finish that question with what I started with earlier. It isn't so much what we say, it's what we do.
Lead with action, not with
Barack
words.
Obama can make a great speech with a teleprompter. But we freeze spending at this levels after we've increased it by 21% last year, and we're busted. There ain't no tomorrow. The working people of America aren't going to, everybody says food's getting more expensive, gas is getting more expensive, colleges are getting more expensive. Bullshit. The dollar is worth less because of the deficit. That's what's going on. The working class of America is getting frappéed by government spending. All the rest of this crap about investment and about education. More kids would be going to college if it costs less. The dollar is going down a toilet because of what's happening. And if this doesn't stop, America's in a terrible position. Why didn't we talk about that last night in the State of the Union? Rhetoric. Today, it's all about rhetoric. Whether it's a pop singer or a politician, it's all about style and how, you know, I remember Madonna had an album coming out, so she made a photo album where she was getting everybody the finger. You know, oh, that's edgy.
So you're you become president of the United States, and you're in the current situation, and you're a problem solver, and no one can solve everything instantly. First three things you do to make a shift in this economy or a shift in the confidence of the world in us.
I would have announced that if you can convince the Internal Revenue that you've increased the size of your workforce with health insurance, we'll subsidize 50% of the payroll. You would have had job formation in every corner of the economy in 60 days. And all that, you could have hired at least 3 million people on that first TARP program, or if you add in the so-called, what was the program? The stimulus. You add in the $800 billion in the stimulus, you could have created 6-7 million jobs like nothing.
Just by saying, here's the incentive.
We'll take that same money and we'll subsidize payroll for anybody that hires it. Private enterprise would have done that in a half a second. Tax policy is the power of the government. And the most dynamic use of power is in the restraint of it. Uncle Sam can collect taxes. The restraint of tax collection is a powerful tool. You can make the public do anything you want with tax policy. But the politicians don't want to do that. They want to get the money to Washington so they can spend it. That's the disease. Alexis de Tocqueville, the French philosopher, said in 1909, the American system of democracy will prosper until that moment when the politicians discover that they can bribe the electorate with their own money. We've come to it. We've come to it, and it's time for us to decide whether we're an entitlement society or whether we're not an entitlement society. So you say, you touch those entitlements you mentioned about pushing out the retirement age or cutting back on Medicare, you're out of politics. I don't believe it. I think they underestimate the American public every time. Somebody gets up there and tells them the truth, they won't throw him out of office, they'll elect him again.
3 questions from the audience and we'll wrap. 3 questions from the audience. Anyone have a question and we'll wrap? How about this lady right here? Yes, ma'am. Give her a hand.
Hi, I'm Stacy Wells from Michigan, and we've had quite a downturn in the economy because we're so car dependent. Since you said leadership is really common sense and listening to the people, I'm not seeing that happening now with our political environment. How do we, as good leaders in our own business, who have common sense and listen to our people, affect change? I know in Michigan we got a new governor who seems to be doing the right things, and I'm so excited about that. I'm looking forward to some tax policy changes. But what can we do on a practical level, on a daily level, to make our voices heard?
If I understand your question, ma'am, it's what can people in Michigan, which depends upon the automobile industry heavily, do to affect change? And I assume that you're not in the car business, is that right?
No, I'm actually in the salon and day spa business, and I own a cosmetology
Okay.
school. So we're retraining like crazy, which I love, and growing like crazy. But just kind of affecting the mindset. How do we do that to get people to realize that they can do things on their own?
Recognize